My mother says fox while gesturing toward an old red wagon that's been abandoned in our yard for decades. Fox, a word that's so cavernous her entire body vanishes into it. Body of misfiring electrons, scattered images, no contexts. Body that is mainly just a body now. No other animal knows how to be this incomplete. I think if you were a fox, coyotes would have eaten you by now. But I say, yes, Mom, I'll climb into that fox and let you pull me through the high grass one more time. I'd like to get that one out of the way. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's wonderful it's always a good excuse to come down to Eugene. I don't get too often. I live up in Portland, so it was really nice to come down here. And I love the combination of poetry and fiction and music too, apparently. So that's going to be fantastic. As opposed to an hour and a half of poetry. You get to hear a little bit of everything. It's going to be great. So yeah, thank you so much. So that first poem, I like to get the tough stuff out of the way. There's a number of people here that were here at a reading in Springfield about, 3 weeks or so ago that I was at the Emerald Art Center. So for those, I either apologize, because you can hear some of the same poems. They're always the ones that you like to read that sound better out loud, right? So you can hear some of the same poems. Hopefully that is a good thing as opposed to a bad thing. And some new ones too. But that last poem was called Death is a Work in Progress. Obviously about the deterioration, obviously of my mother at that point. And that's in my collection, which isn't out yet, but it comes out next week. But I have my copies through the University of Nebraska Press. And this one is a bit more personal, I think, than the other one that came out earlier this year. And to kind of stick with the family theme a little bit more, I'm going to start with, it was a golden age of monsters. The sickle moon bobs like a child's paper boat between silhouettes of paper mountains. I am watching steam swell off a herd of bison in a black and white book about the American West. Too young to read much into what I'm reading. The world is all image, unfinished rail track and Douglas fir, level saw cuts, rings tracing us back to the beginning. The dozen spears projecting from a felled paper beast are replaced the next chapter by rifles and iron and that same falling. Tomorrow it will snow, and my father will drive me down to the hospital again. Snowflakes crazing about our headlights, paper moon up there between the mountains. I will be thinking about bison, blood on the page, not the pillow. The road that curls home always seems to erase itself, and the steam coming off of it, frail as breath. So, I'm going to look for poems not about loss, but that gets difficult. It's all about finding the little glimmers of light that are trying to poke through the darkness. More than anything else, I find that that's what poetry is about. What's a poem that's all light? How is that reality, right? But when there's a lot of darkness, but attempting to cut through it. So hopefully there's a little bit of light in some of the darkness here. This poem is called Symptoms of Shelter. I talk a bit about my privilege in a number of poems, being a white, male, tall, able-bodied, cisgendered, I was born pretty lucky, I guess, culturally speaking. Symptoms of Shelter. If I could reconcile the fullness of the moon, of the black oak tonight's moon illuminates, with the bodies I've seen in photographs hanging from an oak at night in just this light. There are only so many perfect moments allowed us. Why must they all end with the sky constricting, bleeding, the trees emptying of birds. Buckshot in the distance, dog bark, and good night. Everywhere the dead and nothing to be done. This familiar field now going strange. How lucky I have been to love and love this blindly. I think I have the next poem is dedicated to a poem from Mark Strand, for those who are familiar with Mark Strand. One of his probably most famous poems, and one of my introductions to poetry 20 some odd years ago, is this poem from Mark Strand called Keeping Things Whole. In a field I am the absence of field. This is always the case. Wherever I am what is missing. When I walk, I part the air, and always the air moves in to fill the spaces where my body has been. We all have reasons for moving. I move to keep things whole. Yes, thank you, Mark. That was Mark's. Yeah, you hear that? Nice. That's what you want to hear when you're a writer. You're at certain lines. So that poem is always been one of my favorites, one of my introductions to poetry, again, 20 some odd years ago. And when I was just like, wow, this is what poetry can do. As opposed to in middle school and high school when it's like, here's Shakespeare and haiku, and I was like, I don't know what this is. And then I read something like that, and I was like, I know what this is. I don't know what it is. I don't know what words I have for it, but it means something to me. So we all have reasons for moving. I move to keep things whole after discussing the parting of things. That is what I address at the end of this poem. So it's from Mark Strand, and it's called There Is Still. And the title is also the first line. There is still something thin to swing from madly over the glory-faded cottonwood. A different kind of rope and knot, sure, and for a different purpose. But our limbs haven't changed that much. All assent and greed. The sky yielding just enough of itself to urge us higher, higher. They say there is nothing left to worship. And I'd agree, if not for the dust, kicked up every slow, steady swipe we take at erasure. What our grandfathers said their grandfathers did. The haunted house of our bodies, creaking open, almost forgiven. Lately, the dead calm of a summer by the lake, where someone told me someone once hung a child for loving another child, has lost its grace. What we say to the fire in our lungs does not change. It's the same tree. I'd assume we throw the same shadow, long and dark, over its grass and stone. We all have reasons, Mark. I hope I am swinging to remember. So a little different reason there. Perhaps we're swinging, or not. Remembering is keeping things whole. Not letting things be forgotten is keeping things whole. Where is it? There we go. I like to try to read something I don't normally read at every single reading, just cause. So it makes it fresh for me too. So I have just gonna read a couple segments from it, but I have a longer 10, 12 section poem in here, each just one stanza, each about a different theme in a different location. And it's called Dear Nowhere, and then each one is a different location. So this first one is for Butte, Montana. Someone's been to Butte, I heard. All right, a lot of people have been to Butte. Okay. It's nowhere. An aluminum bullring, earth kicked up into a furious mist. Evening, my hand dragging the sunken head of a beast toward evening as well. The safe word here is silence. This is when I know I've gone just far enough. When the sun swallows the earth, odds are it will be like this. I have never actually killed an animal before, but just so you don't think I actually murdered a bull in my life, because I have not. But just, you never know, people. And this is somewhere in North Texas. I'm waiting for the sigh. Oh, I heard a sigh. Excellent. Somewhere in North Texas. Failing to separate ground and sky, I'm complicit in the steady collapse of clouds over barns. Look, how red they rise from this dry body of earth. Is this only body placed on our tongues? Is this blood we're washing it all down with? I'm watching bales of hay unfasten in the distance and wondering if in another rendering of paradise, we wouldn't be throwing stones to silence the owls at night instead. This next one is called for Cheyenne, Wyoming. Nothing. Oh, okay, yeah. This has to do with, this one in particular has to do with I think my privilege, or the privilege of being someone on vacation as opposed to someone who lives somewhere. Cheyenne. Boy on the threshold of song. Boy swallowed up by a flannel 2 sizes too large in a mountain of dust from cars returning east. Boy made up almost entirely of stone in summer, broad empty sky, osprey, owl, hard brown bread. Boy hawking horses whittled from cedar, alone beneath a rusty tin roof in one wall, that from the rear view tapers off to the point of him never having been there at all. And this last one, I'm going to return. I'm going to move away from this this book, so I'm going to start with one about my mother and end there too. This is Yellowstone National Park. Everyone's been there, hopefully. Bison thrum, the darkness breathes, and spear tips flicker in the firelight. There's bull elk implied, or aspen sharpened by shadow. Flame with a circle of stones to temper it. The disembodied words of Whitman and Cormorant returning. On the wind, my mother, before I knew her, or just after. Vaguely in the distance, waters fall and waters crash. The sound of everything I have failed to keep safe. And home. Thank you. You're welcome to do that if you want to. No, I don't need that. The backfire or the opposite of backfire? What's the opposite of backfire? Forward fire? Okay, if I may, I'm going to read a few poems from a slightly more culturally based book, As One Fire Consumes Another, which came out in April. So, I was, unfortunately with this book, a lot more cultural, I don't want to say political, but I guess you could say so, in a way. And I was assuming when I wrote this, 2-3 years ago or something, right? Because it came out this year, so it would have been accepted the year before, so I probably wrote the poems the year before that. I assumed the poems wouldn't matter, culturally speaking, anymore, and it would just be of the past, and I wish that were the case. This first poem, it begins with 2 quotes, one of which was from an article back in 2015, which was forever ago, and yet not at all. And that was from Democracy Now!, and it was Mass Graves of Immigrants Found in Texas is the title of the article. And the first line of the article was, Texas says there is no evidence of wrongdoing after mass graves filled with immigrants were found miles inland from the US-Mexico border. And the other quote is from historian Peter Greenaway, who says, there are basically only two subject matters in all of Western culture. Think big, think broad. Sex and death. So if you've seen the images from Pompeii, that absolutely, one of those things, if you strip the context away, it's actually quite beautiful. You know what I mean? These encased bodies hardened forever, like twined together, families. It's so beautiful if you take away the context of death. And that was kind of what I was thinking of when writing this poem, and what some of the images from this article, only 4 years ago, when I wrote this. So it's called No Evidence. Body atop body, in some vague act that might be called love, if not for the caption, mass grave discovered. What I took to be mouths frozen in ecstasy, limbs linked in lust, men and women united in a heavenly gesture that I would never know, angled just slightly into horror. The meaning we make from things depends on the camera's eye. I cannot see the undead stars surely overhead, that white windowless van abandoned nearby. Faces finally reconciling with their names. As I cannot see myself with all the mirrors removed. As I cannot touch my wife when she rolls to the window edge of the bed. Backlit by the teeth of border lights, sewn into the hide of the landscape like maps. Hundreds of officers shovel up thousands of loose-fitting bones. Parents and children and doubled-over sexless stars, all profanely beautiful. Thank you. Next poem, a little short one, is called Pinata. For being a man, I'm terrified of men and what men can do. And how we're raised, I should say. Embarrassed, terrified, and many other things, especially being a parent now of a boy and a girl. So Pinata. Body broken into, all the sweetness torn out. Brightly dyed paper flakes linger in the grass as if someone has sanded down the sun. The husk of an animal hangs loosely from a sky that's clouding over in storm. Tomorrow, he will be a man. Until then, sticks are just sticks. Thrashing the insides out of some martyred beast is just play. Lollipop, marzipan, tamarind. Fire works its way up the arm into bottle rocket, into bang. The sky glimmers and is gone. And whatever the boys can carry home between their teeth will be theirs. I know people, I think I'd read that, I usually do, I like that one. A couple weeks ago, so I apologize if anyone had heard that story before, but it is, I like it. Especially after all the darkness, it's nice to have a little bit of light, where when my kids were turning 3, a couple months, in August, when they were turning 3, and we're getting ready for their birthday party, and went to Target or whatever, and looking for what kind of theme to do. And I was just like, oh, look at that, there are these piñatas, it's gonna be so cool. They're 3, and they're going around on a stick, and it's so much fun, and invite their friends. And my wife I got all excited about it, like I was a little kid. I was like, oh, it's a piñata. And my wife's like, there's that poem that you have in your book that you always read about piñatas and what that's training boys to do and stuff like that. And I was like, oh yeah. So we didn't get piñata, for better or worse. But it's one of those things that kind of opened my eyes in some ways. I mean, it's kind of a little funny story or whatever, but it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that I can write about that when I'm thinking about it, but as soon as I'm not thinking about that, I'm still just like, yes, I want to hit that thing and have the candy fall down, which has kind of terrified me a little bit about myself at the same time, but you know, it's not as scary as Peppa Pig. It's terrifying. If anyone knows what Peppa Pig is, it's not good. This next poem, actually going back to one's own childhood, Understudies. In our parents' bedroom, exchanging overalls for ties, bras. I am playing mother again, and Tyler, for those 10 minutes between breakfast and church, you can be dad's hard, open palm. Both your feet drown in shiny black Sunday shoes. It takes time for the world to whiten around the temples, to scar. You are trying and failing to find something awful enough to pray away, stuffing your big boy pockets with miracles that sound like stopped watches. Now hold me, how they say they held each other once. Tell me how pretty I was when your arms first danced my waist around a crowded Elks Lodge to a song that ended in two sons and a need to atone. And I will show you how to be forgiven without asking the sky, how to love without using your mouth. And I'm going to, where's my little guy there? There we go. Just a couple quick poems, if I may, and then get to hear a couple wonderful poets and some music. This is the closest thing I have to an overtly happy poem. Closest thing. It's called Grace Notes. We are driving west with the sun, swaddled in storm cloud, and all that pristine nothingness that is Kansas, flattening behind us. I've learned there are ways to sing along to radio silence, though I'm less convinced these days that anyone is listening. How quickly winter empties our voices of its animals. Windows down in the gray horizon, suddenly too small to carry inside us. You are the worst kind of lover, highway, landlocked between fled and imagined homes. As our headlights, like slowly falling fires, kick out into the afternoon rain, and the kids from the back seat start naming everything that blurs by us birds, and suddenly birds again, we begin making Motown of the dead air. I have no idea what I promised them about tomorrow. But the sky is devastating as whirling white asters. And no clouds will ever make these wild animal shapes again. It's kind of close. It's almost happy, kind of. And thank you. Hey, look at that. Finally, Sovereignty. Gonna end with some kid poems. I'm sure they're missing me. Sovereignty. 200 green plastic army men circle around a tea set. All the Matchbox cars are up on blocks in the yard. No one ever laughs when I read this poem. I'm so happy to hear people laughing. I thought those were funny. While my daughter's dolls wage wars on the flamingos basking in a flagpole's shadow, the mower is making birdshot of each dandelion head. For once, summer is what it seems. A trick of the light, a mistranslation, a castle of air. And all fathers are invented gods. And now I am a father inventing a world where matchstick sailboats can set the entire ocean ablaze. My children take turns pulling me around our safe green box of earth in a red wooden wagon. It doesn't take much to convince the sky that we have no idea how to hold it. I just realized I get pulled around twice in red wagons in these books. Stupid wagon. But and I wanted to, I just had one more poem, but I wanted to thank you again so much for inviting me. It was wonderful to come down here. And if I'm going to say for you, right, I believe you have some books over there, so I think, look at this, I'm going to help you. So I think a number of the people, and maybe you have CDs too, so a number of people are going to have some stuff back there if you want afterwards to chat with the poets. I'll do that for you, so you don't have to. So yeah, I have one more poem, and thank you so much again. It's called The Crossing. Tell me what not to do with heaven-faced children, torn between parents, torn apart by a river that's tearing a long, muddy scar into this long and lengthening landscape. Then tell me again why we are the only animals bound by allegiances, shifting maps. Tell me what not to forgive of the stars, what color skin, my skin, is forbidden to touch, what heart, my heart, cannot possibly hold without breaking. Don't tell me the best way to, Don't tell me the best way to break a body without damaging its shell. We all know how that story ends. Ask the bridled horses. Ask mothers waiting on docks for warships never to return. Ask any long, cold winter night in any part of any city that any child has ever fled to find herself no closer to home. Please tell me, what road that begins in ruin ends somewhere beautiful? Thank you.